Did I mention? If you got a hand on your lips, I tell you with somebody to if you got somebody to bring the letter on your brain,
Y'all feeling the Friday morning dance party? In a good place? Good day to have a good day. Come on, 3, 2, 1. Rock bones.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for a moment of silence. We have a couple of announcements this morning, so that this is very important. If you leave something at home or have something dropped off, we do not, I repeat, we do not call you out of class to pick these items up. If you know you are having something delivered, it is your responsibility to come to the office on your time to get these items. Also, don't forget, voting for class officers is August the 10th through the 15th. Check your grade level Google Classroom to vote for your class officers. And students, don't forget to get your packets to turn in to one of your teachers or bring them to me in the front office. Everyone have a great day.
All right. Friday, it's a great day to have a great day. You got several things on your desk in front of you. I'm going to explain here in just a second. So let's start with paper handback party. Trinity, did you get everything back to people? So you got your Great Awakening check. You did a good read there. And you got your Comparing the Colonies chart back. Our project amounted basically to 2 daily grades. Okay, your chart was one, and then your turn-in was the other. I got, so let's talk the trifold, trends of the trifold pamphlet real quick. This is not your class, but I got some great hand-drawn ones. My third block, I had them only do hand-drawn, so I got several of those. Most of you did the digital version, and I compiled them into a single document, and I'm going to send it to the library today to print in color. So when I get those back, I will trifold your pamphlet, and I'll show you what it looks like. I'll show you what your pamphlet looks like, and I'm going to hang some of them around the class, probably outside, the most colorful and those that definitely filled in all the blanks, such like that. It leads to trends, and I'm just going to say this to all my classes, whether it fully applied to this class or not. I'll say this. Here's what I took points off for. Basic spelling, capitalization, and punctuation. You're turning me in a product that, we said that it was going to be part of advertising your colony. So if we have poor spelling or capitalization, that's detail stuff. Honors class, right? That's paying attention to detail. So you lost some points. It could have been that. Large blank spaces. I didn't go with every single, take this one, take this hand-drawn one, for example. I wasn't saying color the whole 8.5 by 11. This is a good example of catching my eye on the cover. Some of y'all had whole panels blank or, 3 words written in significant blank spaces after that. So that was points off. And then just no color, i.e., a whole blank panel. I don't think anyone in this class had a whole blank panel, but I just wanted to explain that up front. My own feedback, I could offer you guys a rubric for projects in the future. I generally believe that people are going to bring me the same energy I bring them. I also understand that sometimes it is good to have it written down and, hey, this is exactly what the project looks like. So I don't think we ran into any big issues. Wow, I didn't know what you expected. Just explain a little bit if you lost some points, that is the why. Overall, pretty good. I was excited to see the ones that got turned in. And then the real last thought there is this is the standard trend. If you got a goose egg in the grade book, what's a goose egg? Zero. Yeah, you get 0 in the grade book. It's just because I don't have it. Period. I'm going to do that even if you were absent for X amount of time because it got your attention. It got my attention. Ooh, so-and-so didn't turn something in. They were absent. They got 3 days left. But I don't want it hanging out as a no grade because then you aren't aware that I'm missing it, right? Or it's not factored into your average. And then let's say, 3 weeks from now, I got to sling some zeros in there. And you go from a 92 to a 78. I'm like, whoa! I'm going to plug a 0 until you give me the paper. And I think that gets everyone's attention all the way around. So if you got a 0, I didn't have it. If you turned it in and I don't have it, hey, mistakes get made. But generally speaking, you didn't turn it in. And you probably know that, and you need you shuffle through your papers or something else. So that's the upfront up there. Let me explain what's on your desk, and we're not going to use everything immediately, but I did just lay it out to save some paper handout time. So first is the study guide, Unit 1 study guide. It's 3 pages stapled together. That makes it 6 pages front and back. We haven't gotten some of the content yet. I got it. Got all of next week as well. But I'm putting it in your hands now so you can be a pre-reader, a pre-studier. If you're a flashcard maker, well, here's the key stuff, right? Said a lot of things in class. Add some extras that add to your life, but won't be on a test. This is what you need to focus on. There's not a test question on here. Don't be like, if I memorize this, I'll be fine. There's not a test question on here. It's test content, though. Not stapled with it, but I would say in the same lines of the study guide, I've built this timeline, and we still have some events to get to, but this is a pretty good timeline going from the start of the story of us to the point that we're going to end. And just like I said yesterday, there's this chunk of salutary neglect and other things along the way. Last year, I had access to a color printer. I was able to print things in color until I got told that costs a lot of money. The black and white still comes out just fine. I will put it on Google Drive or Google Classroom if you want to see the color version of that. I don't think there's anything you can't see, though, because of color. And then finally, this is something we're going to get to today, so just hold on to it. What you need to pull out is your Road to Revolution notes, because that is what we're going to round out today. So as you do that, you can know that it's Friday, and on Friday, I like for you to, oh no, I had my volume off. Technical transitions. Oh, we got all the music on. You shut up, you start. There it is. Tell me something good. It's Friday. I started this last week. You've had a week to think about. Oh, he's going to ask you again. Tell me something good. Something you're doing this weekend, something that's happened to you in the past, something you read in the news. Tell me something good. Be careful scratching your head, Ray, when I come to you. Jordan, you're smiling. Tell me something good. What you doing this weekend? Not even sure. Waking up at the same time or sleeping in longer? That's good. That's something good. Jackson, you're always good for it. Tell me something good. Tell me something good.
Well, it is Friday. Got the weekend. Think about it. Got a couple of tests to push through this afternoon today. Get to enjoy the rest of the time off, doing relax and do a little bit of work.
All right. Who's going to football game tonight? I know you are, because you're going to cheer at it. Yeah, bit of a drive for a road game, for a road scrimmage at that. But it's your first football cheer game ever. Hey, that's a perfect example, Jackie. When I say tell me something good, that's exactly what I'm looking for. Oh, you got your custom shirt too. Y'all wearing that? Cool. Very cool. Well, I'm excited for the first home game. I will be there. I do have Army drill this weekend, so I'm not driving to Soperton Friday night for the scrimmage. I will tell you my something good. Now, it doesn't have to be, like I say, you tell me something from your life or something that you got planned for the weekend. But I like to hunt the good stuff. I like to find something good in the news. And this is my telling you something good, just to increase the positivity in the room. Article I saw recently, it says Green Bay Packers football stars join a young fans impromptu tea party on the sideline. If you don't know, I'm not a Green Bay Packers fan. I'm not a diehard by any means, right? I'm a Denver Broncos fan for what it's worth. But something cool about the Green Bay Packers is that they are fan-owned. They're not owned by a single person. They're not owned by a corporation. They are literally owned by stock. And so, you buy stock into the Green Bay Packers. Something else cool that they do is that their players walk from their dressing facility to their practice field over a pretty lengthy open parking lot. And as they do that, a routine or a tradition has come for fans to line that route, wave at them. In the past, they even had kids line up with their mountain bikes or their whatever bicycle kids ride. Players, think about a 300-pound lineman riding on a 10-speed. It was just kind of a cool way to interact with fans. That's a little bit of a background. Well, this gal here, she's in a princess outfit, and she's got a little toy tea set, and she is offering tea to all these players as they come out. And, some of them in a rush, but, oh, that's cute. Hey, Well, this one fella, he actually stopped and took some tea. There is a video, so in the interest of really telling you something good, I'm going to show you something good as well. And we'll just watch this real quick, and I'll smile.
So I'll grab it. Speaking of dancing, my time on the table is about guys who actually dance when they score a touchdown. Yeah, players from the Green Bay Packers. They're joining one a little fan with an impromptu team party. Check it out. That is awesome right there. Listen, training camp, practice, the monotony of waking up every day doing the same thing. It'll really get to you. Your body will start to fatigue, your mind will start to fatigue, but it's fans like this that make it all worth it. The players walk by.
And there's nothing in the cup. I love how they just go along with it.
And a couple of players said, "Oh, this is the best game ever," and she just lit up.
I know. I think that's so sweet.
That's awesome. Beautiful.
Tell me that didn't make you smile. Tell me that's not something good.
All right, so
Cue that up for the next class. All right. We're all smiling. We're all ready to continue the causes of the American Revolution. So you got your notes out. Go ahead and turn to whatever heading point we're at. It's on the third page, just one section down. We are going to review a little bit up front, and I hope you will remind me of things. I hope you'll be ready, conversive. You remind me of what we've already talked about. I'm going to tell you a couple new things, and then we're going to get to this gallery walk. I got some papers posted outside, so I'll explain this. So, first of all, chuckle, one more. For anything else I've said, here's the real summary. I just heard a British person called Oreos chocolate sandwich biscuits, and now I understand why the American Revolution had to happen. Because we can't tolerate Oreos being called chocolate sandwich biscuits for on our holiday. Anyway, there are some isms from across the pond. They say things and do things differently than we do. Let me remind you how we started yesterday. This is a review. I told you that the president has taken away your freedom to travel around the United States, and you guys kind of had three general responses. It's a spicy question. Y'all had opinions, but our three general responses were kind of fell into what categories? What's that? One is protest, rebellion, and protest can kind of go two directions. What are the two directions of protest? Civil and civil and nonviolent, or harsh, violent, destructive. So protest can go two directions. What's another category? Accept it. Yeah, okay. The president said it. I'm just gonna follow the law, I guess. And then what's the third one? Break the law, right? You can't tell me where I can't go. I'm gonna go wherever I want. My freedoms, right? My rights as a human. So, and that may blend into a protest or a violent protest of some sort if you're breaking the law as well. Now, I did have a kind of an interesting observation. It didn't really hit me till later in the day, past your block. I shut off these desks, right? And when I shut off these desks, I told you you're not allowed to sit there. You four, what did you do? You found a different seat. All that rabble about I'm going to protest. No one can tell me where I can or can't go. Authority figure told you to not sit there. What'd you do? Just listen, right? So we sometimes think we'll be that, I'll be a protester. Don't you tell me what I can't do. When in fact, it kind of hit me that students were just following what I told them to do. So interesting, right, about human behavior. That was our starting point. What did this connect to in our class? Proclamation of 1763. So tell me about that. Our starting question is never just for funsies. It's always going to matter. How did our starting question really illustrate the proclamation line? What did the proclamation line forbid colonists to do? Go west of a particular boundary. What was it? Appalachian Mountains. Now, Appalachian Mountains, it's a geographical feature, but what was it not?
Actual border.
Yeah, it was not an actual border. There was not a wall, there was not a fence, and Jackie points out it was not what? It was not actually successful for that reason. I gave you guys the example of parenting. I think I said it in this class. If your parents make a rule and don't enforce it, what do you think? What do you then think about your parents and their rulemaking? Oh, he don't really mean it, right? Curfew at 11. I roll in at 11:30 all the time. They don't really mean it. So parenting advice, as much as government, don't make a rule that you don't intend to enforce. Well, the British here, they broke that rule, that principle of parenting. They made a rule, they didn't enforce it. So what did that make the colonists think about their rules? continue to stretch boundaries. Let's see how far we can go. They're not going to enforce it anyway. So yeah, I think we understand this. This is good. I'm not rehashing the whole thing. The results are that it generally failed. It wasn't policed by British troops. People still settled across the boundary line anyway. That Ohio River Valley, believe it or not, was the desired land of the day. I don't think a whole lot of people are rushing to settle in Cleveland, Ohio these days. But at the time, it was beyond the border, and it was new and lush and good for crops. So the Ohio River Valley was the desired location of the day. Salutary Neglect. Now, I think I told you pretty well that I was honest with you. I said, I walked into this job as a U.S. history teacher, and I stumbled across this vocab word, and I did not fully understand it myself. So if I didn't understand it, good belief that you guys probably didn't understand it as well until I explained it to you. So I had to learn it. I hope I explained it to you guys pretty well as well, and I've just done something to remind you what is salutary neglect. Jackie's crushing it this morning. Not enforcing the laws of the empire. Salutary neglect was a lengthy time period. You could look at the timeline I've given you. If you've got it in front of you, don't scrabble through your papers. If you've got it in front of you, lower left, you'll see a bracket of time labeled as salutary neglect. What was that bracket of time? Starting with the beginning of the story of us, Jamestown, ending with the end of the French and Indian War, and one of the first we're now going to enforce the law is the Proclamation 1763, basically, right? Jamestown to the end of the French and Indian War, which is 1763. So salutary neglect was when the king would look the other way, keep his sunglasses on in order to avoid enforcing certain laws, collecting certain taxes. And then the colonials were allowed to do something that helped them feel independent. What was that something? She said currency. I hear that. That's not quite. Yeah, talking to others. But what did every colony kind of have inside of it? No, not currency. You guys are stuck on currency a little bit. Yeah, government. A representative assembly of some sort, whether representative or direct. They had their own body, their own legislature, and even though we're part of the empire, we get to vote on our representatives. We get to have local laws, and that affect us, not by some king who's 3,000 miles away. We are generally independent. We like being British, and we like being generally independent until the withdrawal of salutary neglect. A change in attitude led to what? King takes off his sunglasses. I'll get to this picture finally. The king takes off his sunglasses. He's no longer ignoring certain laws and taxes. So what follows the withdrawal of salutary neglect? Variety of taxes, collecting taxes because they're in debt from what? French and Indian War. Yeah. We have to withdraw salutary neglect. When I say we, I mean the crown. The crown has to withdraw salutary neglect because it's broke. It's got to collect some taxes that previously it was maybe looking the other way on. So enforcing laws, collecting taxes, that's big. And then angry face was on what? What's the one thing that really made colonists angry? Self-government. Yeah, these ability to have these representative bodies. So this is 150 years of ignoring certain policies as long as those colonies remain beneficial. This is enforcing laws, taxing the colonies, and starting to mess with their representative assemblies. I gave you 2 more examples there, and I'm not going to rehash those. It was, remember, if I all of a sudden force my kids to pay for their tumbling, they're going to be like, wah! Or the referee thing, he let a lot of fouls go. He starts enforcing the fouls. Players are like, wah! Colonists were like, wah! As soon as salutary neglect was withdrawn. So that's my sunglasses. Anytime you see sunglasses, you can think of the king and his salutary neglect process right there. Good review. Leads to these various acts, and this is what we walked through. Sugar, currency, Stamp Act. Stamp Act is the one that really got some traction inside the colonies, some conversation in these representative assemblies, which were under attack. And a very famous statement by a man, Patrick Henry. What did he say? Give me liberty or give me death. Guys, we're talking about a stamp. we're gonna die over a stamp. We're gonna die over a stamp. We're gonna die over. Coleman's shaking his head. I'd like to hear from Coleman. What you got? Yeah, it's not the stamp, it's the principle of independence. Patrick Henry says, I'm drawing the line. Give me liberty or give me death. Patrick Henry was a son of liberty. We talked about the Sons of Liberty. That's where we paused yesterday. And they were, what kind of organization? I'm teaching you that they're a terrorist organization. I'm not trying to use spicy words to cause any controversy. Legitimately speaking, they did things that today would be defined as terrorism. Attacks against civilians in order to make political aims, use of violence, and that is something that we kind of have to wrestle with. Wow, our original freedom was brought under these type of actions to include tarring and feathering and pouring scalding hot tea down to one's throat. They were terrorists, and we talked about that, kind of brought it to light for you, that it wasn't some prank, it wasn't toilet paper in someone's house, it was real bodily harm to someone. This photography comes out later in time, but still depicts what is tarring and feathering. These are the Sons of Liberty. Kind of left at the point of showing you the television show Sons of Liberty from the History Channel. All right, we're not going to do this today because I did it last year with this class, but for two of you who are new to our group here. So I'd like those of you who experienced the King's Candy to describe to me what is this simulation. It takes about 20, 25 minutes to do it. Since we've already done it, we're going to push a different direction. But Jordan raised her hand. Jordan, go ahead and describe to me what is the King's Candy. Fatima and Coleman, since you didn't experience this, go, pay attention. Big up for me. Okay. So that's the currency. You two, that's the currency. Everybody gets the same amount of currency. Continue. Or some key players I had up front for starters. There were tax collectors who came from the colonists. There were who else? There was the king. Who was our king? Jayla, that's exactly right. I remember that now. I had to ask Jackson if we did this last year. He reminded me. Jayla was the queen, if you will. And then she had two compadres. Who were they? What were they? Well, that's the people, but what was their position? No, the other two. Representative Assembly in England. Parliament, yeah. So let me set the scene for you. Jackie's about to smile. We have a king, queen. We have two tax collectors. Jackie was in my second semester class, which is the picture I found on my phone. And then we had two members of parliament. All right, that's the setup. Jordan said that there was the currency all across the board. Now, Jordan, I'm going to keep going with Jordan since you volunteered. The king, in this case, that's Blaise Johnson, the queen. She would deliver edicts, and what type of, what would come out of her mouth? What was she saying to the colonies? Yeah, what, do you remember one in particular, maybe? All right, I'll go with the race there. Yeah. Hey, hear ye, the king, queen now declares everyone wearing a jacket owes me 3 M&Ms. And you who are wearing a jacket, Coleman, you're wearing a hoodie, Fatima, you're wearing a jacket, you'd be like, I got 12 M&Ms, and I got to give away 3 of them? So who would go around and collect those M&Ms? Oh, yeah, Jackie and Knox in this case. And Jackie, when you're collecting M&Ms from your compadres, from your classmates, how do they treat you? All of a sudden, we were friends 3 minutes ago, but then she became a tax collector, and she's trying to take my currency. We're not cool anymore. So that illustrated how the colonists started to turn on their former colony mates and start disliking tax collectors. Now, tax collector, when you were done, let's say you went around the room, you collected, upwards of 20 different M&Ms. What did you get to do? But what did you first get to do? Keep them, right? Tax collector, you got to keep a couple because that's her job. That's a perk. So she kept a couple, skimming off the top. She then delivered to whom first? Parliament got a couple, and the remainder, which was a lot, went to the king, queen. All right. So we did this several rounds. Colonists, you ended up with about 2 or 3 M&Ms. Tax collectors skimmed off the top every time, ended with a healthy amount. Parliament, more than that. And then the queen, Jayla had a bunch, right? Jayla had a full cup of M&Ms, whereas you had 2 or 3. So in the end, let's land the point here. Reminder for most of y'all, telling a couple of y'all, what did we feel? How did you colonists feel about taxes? all of a sudden, you realize why these American colonists were ready to fight over this taxation. You realize the unfairness of this person. By the way, the queen was physically as far away from you as possible. Imagine that's 3,000 miles across the ocean. She got all my Skittles. She don't even know my name. We realized why these colonists were ready to fight. So that was the King's Candy on Fast Forward. I have done it with pretzels before as well. My honors class here has already done it. So we're gonna push a different direction, and that's the joy of being an honors class. You get to do more. But right now we're gonna go back. Do remember Jayla now. I feel like that. I try to put pictures on my Google Drive, and I cannot find that picture last night. That's right, book bag. grab a clipboard and just save a minute when we transition. All right, I already got the next screen on, and those of you who have passed through this class before, I know that some of these slides look similar to when we discussed the American Revolution. I used some of these slides. That's fine. You're here for the second time. Unless you got it memorized, it's worthwhile for you to have the review. And I am going to turn it to you with the Road to Revolution gallery walk. All right, so, but wait, there's more, right? After that taxation exercise, you're all riled up and angry about I didn't have enough Skittles and the Queen ate them all. But wait, there's more, and it's called the Taungen Axe. So Charles Taungen, they're named after him. He is the British Esquire and basically Secretary of the Treasury. Okay, so that's related to money. About exchange, right? If you're exchanging money, Esquire, he's British Treasury Secretary. And in response to, I mean, just as an addition to all of this withdrawal of salutary neglect, needing to collect money to pay off debt from the French and Indian War, and the rabble inside of the colonies, we gotta discipline, right? Back to that parenting analogy. We gotta keep our children in line. Charles Taungen, he enacts several pretty strict measures known as the Taungen Axe. And it is several things grouped together. We say Taungen Axe, there are several things grouped together. Are the horns in the way? First one is the Quartering Act of 1765. Remember, we're walking towards 1776, so we can see the lengthy period of abuse during a decade plus. Quartering is related to a house is called quarters. From a military perspective, anytime we go into, I go to drill and I have lodging for the night, it would be called quarters. And it's still, if you're going to retire to your quarters, that means you're going home, right? The Quartering Act states, excuse me, Ms. Knowlton. Ooh, smells like there's dinner on the stove as well. We'll be staying here tonight. Y'all gonna have to go. The Quartering Act stated that any colonists could be evicted from their house for any reason, the drop of a hat, to quarter British troops. Hey, the troops are here to support the colonists anyway. The least they're going to do is give us house, room, board, food. That was the attitude. So, from the colonist perspective, the Knowlton family all of a sudden has what attitude towards the British soldiers? You're kicked out of their home. They ate the stew that was on the stove. All of a sudden, they're not very favorable. They're not in favor of the British troops being in the colonies anymore. So, one knock at a time, they're turning the opinion of the colonists against themselves. They may get a place to stay for the night, right? They may have the authority to kick you out of their house and the guns to go with it, right? Get out of the house. But they're not doing themselves any favors trying to earn friends inside the colonies. So that's the Quartering Act, required colonists to provide quarters and supplies for British troops in America. And it was actually the providing of supplies that angered the colonists the most, right? I mean, it was a common practice to house strangers, travelers along the way, but stealing their, taking their supplies without payment, that was what angered the colonists the most. So Quartering Act, that's what that one is. Taungen duties. Duty is the same word as tax, right? Duty is a tax. So this were taxes on imports from England, products that are leaving England, coming to the Americas, instantly have a markup on them from this tax, and it was on very common items, such as lead, paint, glass, paper, tea. Household items, consumer goods, something that you're going to drink and you're going to need more of, right? It's not like we're buying a car and you have a car for 8 years, but these consumables, you're going to keep buying over and over and over, and they all have tax on them. They'll have a tax on them. We're going to see boycott on some of these common items because of such. Even as difficult as it was to do away with your daily drink of tea, we're going to see that they boycott tea here in just a second. Here's a picture of what quartering might have looked like. Again, not a photograph. We're not there yet in history, but a depiction of soldiers coming in. I mean, you got multi-generational, grandma, looks like the kids are being protected. Dad, lower right, what's his attitude? What's his face saying? Yeah, that's a glare right there, right? That's dad angry that his family's been put in this position. This depicts the Quartering Act. I'll take us a half step forward, honors class and all. Our Third Amendment in the Bill of Rights is no quartering of troops. You guys have never been put in the position of quartering troops. You know, the National Guard doesn't, hey, we need to stay here tonight, right? We're doing storm relief, disaster relief. We don't have any other place to stay, so Smith family, we're gonna stay here. You've never been put in that position, mostly because of the Third Amendment, because the colonists were so chapped by this Quartering Act that it becomes one of our First Amendments in the Bill of Rights, the Third Amendment. We don't have to talk about it a whole lot today because it doesn't happen. Second Amendment gets a lot of energy because it's still a relevant conversation. Third Amendment, it's in our Constitution, right? We don't quarter troops. This one here, boycott the Taungen Axe, cute little activity. We're not going to do anything like this, but tea, glass, paint, lead, paper. Very common and consumable items that now have a tax on them. So that is Taungen. He looks pretty snooty if you ask me. Taungen doing a little bit of public relations, trying to put some spin on it, right? He needs to go to the no spin zone. He called them external taxes. Now, not to get to the economy too much, but an external tax is a tax on something that doesn't affect the individual, right? You can choose to buy or not buy tea, buy or not buy paper. The tax is on the item. Whether you purchase the item, that's on you. A direct tax, on the other hand, is income tax. Anybody who has income has to pay the income tax. That's the direct tax. So he was saying, hey, it's a tax on items that you may or may not buy. I'm not taxing the colonies. I'm taxing items. Call it what you want. They have the same effect as a direct tax. Cost the colonists money. Kind of like putting lipstick on a pig. You ever heard that phrase? If you put lipstick on a pig, you're trying to make pretty out of something that's still pretty ugly. Pretty ugly. So call them what you want. It had the same. It made the colonists angry. They didn't buy his spin that it was just an external tax. So the colonial response to the Taungen Axe / duties. First, I'm going to walk us through a timeline a little bit here, step by step. 1767, the Massachusetts Assembly circulates a letter of opposition. Just like these days, you would do it on TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, tweeting, whatever. But back then, it was handwritten, circulate this letter by horse rider from town to town to town. So they circulate this letter of opposition. Believe it or not, that letter didn't get much traction. It was like, okay, just one more complaint. Maybe some people read it in the newspaper if it was reprinted, but it didn't get a lot of traction until the British Parliament acknowledged it. British Parliament denounced it. They said, this letter that is in circulation is untrue, and we hereby denounce that letter from the Massachusetts Assembly. They brought attention to it. All of a sudden, people are like, ooh, they don't like that letter? Let me read that letter. Ooh, we agree with Massachusetts. So the British did themselves a disservice by bringing attention to it. Every now and then in life, you make a mistake. Sometimes the best thing to do is just not talk about it, right? 24-hour news cycle, it goes away. Well, the British did the opposite of that. They brought attention to it, and therefore, now that you mention it, the colonists all of a sudden started to take notice and get into the assembly here. The assembly took a vote. Do we agree with this letter, disagree with this letter, which that's a government thing to do. Sometimes a resolution comes out. The assembly either adopts it, with a majority vote or not. Well, they overwhelmingly voted for it, 92-17. Overwhelmingly voting for it, but what's still something that my eye's going to catch? 17 people voted against it. It does speak to the idea that not everybody was in favor of revolution, right? Majority vote there. I got it. It's 92-17. The percentage is certainly on the side of voting for it. But there are people who are not in favor of this revolutionary thing. So keep that in mind as we continue to walk towards 1776. From this, there become boycotts in major cities. Boston, New York, Philadelphia, port cities, okay, major places of receiving goods where trade is happening. They start to protest against certain goods that are related to the town's duties. This is interesting, little twist in history. Taungen himself suddenly dies. I don't know the depth of that history. I do get students give me the slant eye every time I teach this. They're like, yeah, suddenly dies. I don't think there is any larger conspiracy. I think he just died, and in being replaced, his replacement, the next man, repeals these duties. His replacement was more like, hey, I don't want to deal with this, all right? I'm just going to go back on what Townshend did and try to get this off my plate. So I like the political cartoon there. What do you think? What do you think it says about people using their voice together? Yeah, the voice is heard louder, right? I like that. Right? Pretty simple takeaway there. The people are speaking as one. The people are strong together. You're like, yeah, go ahead, raise our taxes. We're going to come after you. So pretty powerful political cartoon there, even in the modern, right? That's not depicting the colonials, but that's depicting people in the modern as well. This leads to, we give a timeline, right? Yeah, this leads to the Boston Massacre. Now, this is probably something you're familiar with. This is one of those things that, catches the Liberty kids. You probably got it in 5th grade and 8th grade. Boston Massacre is a kind of a cornerstone of the American Revolution. But let me make sure we understand the true story. I do believe I told most of y'all in the room as world historians about the Boston Massacre as well. So, Townshend's replacement repeals these actions. All things considered, the colonials probably got what they wanted. They wanted to be rid of these taxes. But because of the pace of information flow, because they had to travel across the ocean, they couldn't just send the message in a tweet. Before that news even reached the colonies, they're still in a fever pitch, and we find ourselves in the Boston Common in, I believe it was March. Do I have a date on the next one here? Killing myself without a date. My bad. I think it's March of 1770. I'll get a date for you there. Cool. Find ourselves in the Boston Common, and we have an event that becomes known as the Boston Massacre. Now, what actually happened what the story that commonly gets told that night is that a group of British marched out, pointed their rifles at a group of colonists, and fired. And that is largely what this picture depicts. This picture is an engraving done by Paul Revere. We're going to hear that name again. You're probably familiar with that name because he rides horses. But he was actually a silversmith and engraver and a son of liberty. He does this engraving, and to look at this picture, if this is all that you knew about the Boston Massacre, who's the good guys and who's the bad guys? Clearly, the British appear to have stood in formation, aimed their rifles, shoulder to shoulder, as the British have been trained to do, firing all at once at a disorganized group of innocent bystanders who are now bleeding out on the ground on just a nice winter's night. If this is all you knew about the situation, clearly the British appear to be the bad guys. What actually happened that night is that the group of colonials were not as innocent as this picture might make it seem. They were antagonizing a group of British. They were throwing rocks, stones. There was snow on the ground, and it has been said that they scooped up, stones, rocks, nails into a snowball, throwing the snowball at the soldiers. So not just a snowball, but kind of a weapons-grade snowball. The soldiers, undertrained, newer to the colonies, some of them as young as 19 years old, weren't quite sure how to deal with this crowd control situation. And on the more accurate side of things, and this has been flushed out in court, just doesn't get commonly retold. The soldiers were not given a direct command to fire. It was more a situation where a young soldier, 19 years old, with an itchy trigger finger, fires the first shot into the crowd. Well, we've talked about this, I think, in world historians and beyond. When one shot gets fired, tensions are elevated. What usually follows? More shots, right? So not the story of soldiers in formation firing squad at innocent colonials, but rather a story of an unruly crowd antagonizing and even provoking the British soldiers, and an accidental first shot that leads to more. And yes, let's not miss that 5 people died on this night, 5 colonials died on this night. The British soldiers were actually apprehended and arrested, taken off into jail. Very often American soldiers who commit crimes in Afghanistan or Iraq, have faced consequences of those crimes. You don't get a free pass to shoot people just because you're in uniform. These British soldiers, initially, those under investigation, no one wanted to stand for them as a lawyer. That's understandable, right? They're the bad guys, right? And who wants to be seen defending the British? Do you know who finally stepped up and defended them? Trivia, but interesting. None other than
Picture frame.
Second president of the United States, John Adams. Wasn't second president at that time. John Adams, a Boston lawyer, son of liberty, forefront of the rebellion movement, the future rebellion movement, he said, everyone in this land deserves a fair defense. Who are we if we don't provide everyone in this land a fair defense under the law? So he stood for these lawyers. He put up a defense for the, he stood for these soldiers as their lawyer, put up a defense for them, and they, in a court of law, were actually acquitted of their crime. Now, they were quickly shipped back to England, which was probably a good decision on the part of the British, like, let's just get these soldiers out of here. But they were acquitted of the crime under the law. But that's not the story that often got circulated. The story that got circulated was one of, well, what's it called? The Boston? How many people have to die for something to be a massacre? Like, by your definition, how many people have to die for something? A dozen, a lot. Blood spilling in the streets. I mean, students have said outrageous numbers like 500 plus before. How many did I tell you that? 5. Not to belittle 5 deaths. But is that a massacre? But when you say it is, all of a sudden people's emotions go level 12. This was used as propaganda, right? The naming of this event by itself was used as propaganda to rally people towards the patriot cause, the rebellion, the cause for independence. This is a more modern picture, old, done by Paul Revere, more modern. I don't exactly know the date, but I would say this is a little bit more accurate. Why? Based off of the whole story I just told you, why is this a little bit more accurate? Yeah, there's belligerents on both sides. One man has a club and he's coming towards the British as well. The British have felled soldiers. None of them died, but some of them were injured. So I think this depiction becomes just a little bit more accurate as well. Now, one of the first men to fall at the time is one of the 5 to die, and he's very often called the first death of the American Revolution, this man named Crispus Attucks. And he becomes representative of that cause for independence. Blood has been shed now, right? We're not just talking about taxes. We're not just talking about the inconvenience of quartering. We're actually talking about blood has been shed. Crispus Attucks was the almost like this perfect representation of an American minority. He was half African, half Indian. I don't know which tribe, but half Indian. So he has a darker complexion. He was not a slave. He was not enslaved. He was a dock worker, a ship worker. And very often he is portrayed as that essence of an innocent bystander who was cut down in the crossfire. True history will show Crispus Attucks was one of those belligerents. I'm not saying he deserved to die over it, but he was one of the belligerents that led to the first shots being fired. So just an interesting mixed history on Crispus Attucks overall. Rounded out Boston Massacre. So the soldiers were tried, found guilty of manslaughter, but it was called murder. Manslaughter is an accidental death, but colonial propaganda instantly calls it murder. And, without the ability to fact check, these days, right, a headline can go out and you can instantly get on the other type of website, and find a counterfact. Colonials didn't have that ability. They had one headline to read, one source of information, the newspaper that was right in front of them. And if this is being called murder, not manslaughter, that's one of those things that, again, makes tensions flare or makes the situation seem a whole lot worse than it was. Being guilty of manslaughter, like I said, they got sent back to England where they would have been, out of the colonies. All right, this leads to, now we're going to more rapidly walk towards 1776. This leads to the creation of something that's called Committees of Correspondence, originally proposed by Samuel Adams, a son of liberty, the cousin of John. They're not brothers, they're cousins. Very different as well. One of them was more philosophical and academic, that's John. One of them was more of a fighter and a revolutionary, that's Sam. So Samuel Adams, being a leader of the resistance movement, he organizes this thing called Committees of Correspondence. And today, you'd call that a group chat. Just like you guys have, whether it's 5 of you or 30 of you or your team or your church or your Remind, whatever, you guys call it a group chat. But we have to consider how difficult it was to spread information, much less consistent information from group to group at this time period. The fact that he organized this group chat from colony to colony was pretty amazing. And it was used to share information, publicize the grievances. That's a word we're going to talk about more in the coming days. Publicize the grievances that we have against England. He got other colonies to do the same, and in essence, it was an organized propaganda campaign. Not full on fake news, right? They're not lying about some of these events, but they are exaggerating, and they're sharing information from colony to colony. That way, it's not just a Massachusetts problem, a Massachusetts fight. It is now an American problem, and everybody's on the same page. So committees of correspondence, pretty revolutionary. Revolutionary. I quit standing on this side. And yes, it is that Sam Adams. So when you're 21 or maybe in your parents' refrigerators and you see a Samuel Adams beer, it is that Sam Adams. There is one blend of this beer called the Boston Lager, and that is just kind of a direct reference to his activities as a son of liberty. So briefly, I'm going to give this only to, no, I'm going to skip this one. All right, the psychology of revolt. This leads to the rally cry called no tax, which is no taxation without representation. At the heart of the issue, they just wanted to have a voice in government. It wasn't that we hate being British. It wasn't that we're abused by the empire. It's that they are doing things they're making decisions from 3,000 miles away across the ocean that affect us, and they don't understand us, our land, our economy. Yeah, we're tired of being those abused stepkids under the principle of mercantilism. So the rally cry becomes no taxation without representation. If you want to trace this quote back to the first person who actually said it, it is a son of liberty named James Otis. And I'll give you this, as we always consider our sources and we be good historians. He actually said taxation without representation is tyranny. But that doesn't roll off the tongue quite as just powerfully as no taxation without representation. So I think it's interesting to see the true quote and then to see what it morphed into. I don't think it changes the message. It's just not exactly what you originally said. There you go. James Otis, taxation without representation is tyranny. We got here. So here, I'll elaborate on this briefly. I don't think this is on your notes. The colonists argued that Parliament can legislate for England and the empire as a whole, but hey, we are us. We have individual representative assemblies already. We make decisions locally. Hey, Parliament, you got a wide empire to deal with. That's great. We're going to make decisions for us locally. English argues that, hey, any part of us is subject to Parliament, right? You're not special American colonies. We are England. There's a single undivided unit. There's only one authority. It's the king and Parliament. So just a bit of a philosophical difference. And if we don't bridge the gap here, if the colonists can't come to a compromise between we make our own rules or you're a single unit, something's got to give, and we know that something will give. That's going to be declaring an event. All right, the Tea Act, 1773. We're marching towards 1776. Early 1770s, pretty quiet, although growing resentment. I do find it interesting that there's like this 3-year period without major events, but just that slow brewing of resentment is what's going on. Increasingly intrusive tax collectors. So how do we spread revolutionary sentiment during this time? Pamphlets, leaflets, books, keep that revolutionary sentiment alive. You see the picture here. It shows a poster that's posted on the side of a wall. 1773, actually, from a business perspective, the British East India Tea Company is on the verge of bankruptcy. So the Tea Act, which we're about to talk about, the Boston Tea Party, it isn't some major tax on the colonies for the sake of taxing the colonies. It's actually related to trying to save this company, the British East India Tea Company, which was a major source of income to the British at this time. So I see y'all writing down. I'll wait for pencils to stop moving. We're going to talk about the Tea Act, Boston Tea Party, and then we're going to find ourselves on the verge of war, which is where we'll pause for today. We'll move on. So the Tea Act was an attempt to save the company. It gave the company the right to export tea directly to the colonies without paying any additional taxes. And what that was going to do is undersell American tea producers, right? The British East India Tea Company basically gets a perk, a tax break that local growers aren't going to get. So we're impacting the pocketbook. We're impacting family livelihood. That's what's going to re-energize. Okay, maybe we thought we were past all those taxes. Maybe we thought we were past the duties. but now we're going to be re-energized with this one that's going to hit the pocketbook. Hard to understand how important tea was during, in this time. Best comparison is coffee of today. Just like we have coffee shop on a lot of street corners, Starbucks on every other street corner in New York City and around the world. The coffee drinkers of today would have been tea drinkers in this day. Tea has a little bit of caffeine. It's kind of a social drink, right? People just sit around and drink tea. Tea is probably a little less popular in America today than it was at the time, but you got to consider that it was a staple, a dietary staple at the time. Everybody was drinking tea on a regular basis. So it was a tax that really had an impact. British assumed the colonists would like the act. It actually lowered the cost of tea overall. If you were going to buy from the East India Company, it lowered the cost of tea, but it undercut the American growers, and basically it was an unconstitutional tax. Or it was seen as an unfair, unconstitutional tax. So the colonists didn't care that it saved them money. They cared that it was the principle of just one more rule being made by parents that we don't even like. Leads to a boycott of tea by many people. The picture you see here, this is again from Liberty Square at the Magic Kingdom Disney World, and I love it because I feel like I'm in Revolutionary Boston, 1773, and it has a posting of one of the boycott documents that would have been all around Boston at that time. So, stand tall with the Sons of Liberty, shun the detested beverage. That's the phrase that was used, the detested beverage. So just kind of cool, and that's right at the foot of the Liberty tree as well, so it makes me feel like I'm there. The Tea Act itself, the boycott was quite effective at mobilizing the revolutionary force. Once again, we're on the same page. It linked the colonies through a common experience. Tea. Tea was that uniter. We all drink tea, so we're all angry about it. And here's something very cool. Colonial women became leaders in the boycott. They were among the chief consumers of tea. They would host ladies' teas. That's how they got together with their gals. They sit around and drink tea. They prepared the tea of the day, of the day for the family. They were the grocery shoppers. Colonial women were the first to get real angry about this tea tax. So now it's not just a men's fight. The women are involved as well. They got some reason to be involved, and that leads to the Daughters of Liberty. Not just the Sons of Liberty, but there's also an organization called the Daughters of Liberty. One of their leaders is Mercy Otis Warren. She's actually the sister of the guy who said no taxation without representation. His name is James Otis. These women participated in anti-British riots. They helped spread pamphlets. A lot of times a woman wasn't seen as someone who would be openly protesting because the ladies had a place in the house. Well, they would spread these pamphlets in a way that their husbands couldn't. And then that last bullet point there, I'm not even sure if it's on your notes because I added it, but something they did, a big contribution they did was mending clothes so you wouldn't have to buy new clothes. That lets you boycott British textiles. Other creative things, finding substitute goods locally so that you wouldn't have to buy the good from the British allowed the colonists to boycott British goods. So the mending of clothes and finding substitute goods really undercut. It's like that subversion, really undercut what the British were trying to do with commerce, and that was all led by the women. Leads to the Boston Tea Party. All right, I'm going to give you a brief story of the Boston Tea Party. Boycott of tea is ongoing, and they actually blocked ports from letting these East India Tea Company ships come into port. Like, y'all just stay out there, don't even bother offloading the product. We're not going to buy it. You're not welcome here. We're boycotting tea. So a lot of ports have been blocked. December 16, 1773. Remember, we're walking towards 1776. Groups of the Sons of Liberty, 3 groups, 50 men each, kind of a small raiding party, dressed as Mohawk Indians, bit of a disguise. Nobody really believed it, but they did attempt to disguise themselves. They entered these ships that were on the edge of the port, and they started dumping tea into the harbor. They were actually welcomed onto the ship by the ship's captain. They were given the keys. They said, go ahead, do what you're going to do, clean up afterwards. And in fact, they did. They swept up the deck before they left. The shippers, they didn't care that the product was going to be dumped. They were actually on the side of the continent of the Colonials, but they were just doing the job, right? They were just the ship's captain. So in the end, consequences of this is that the British demand repayment for the property that the Bostonians destroyed. Upwards of $1 million at the time, and I can't even extrapolate that for inflation. I don't know the number. It was a lot of money. There's a lot of tea in the harbor. In fact, it has been said that the harbor was stained like tea for years afterwards. Stained like tea for years afterwards. That's how much tea was in the water at that time. Just another picture of the Boston Tea Party. I believe I've shown this to you before, so I'll just give you the quick. This is actually the tea that we're talking about. I don't know about you, but I was always thinking it was like Lipton tea bags or even the tea leaves. This is a brick of tea. This is tea leaves compressed. And that little hockey puck there, it almost looks like a Hershey's bar, right? A chocolate. That little bar of tea would actually last a family a year. So back to the women, as they made the tea, they boil a pot of water and they kind of shave off whatever the serving of tea was. Just a couple shaves where it would then boil into the pot of water and make tea. So this compressed brick, if you ration that out, really could last a family for like a year. So instead of dumping over tea leaves or throwing out tea bags, I like to imagine these guys like frisbee disking these bricks of tea into the water, and then it slowly dissolves in the water, and that's why it lasted for years. All right, the response to this, I know it's a lot, trust me, I'm talking a lot too. The response to this is called the Intolerable or Coercive Acts. They are punishment for the Boston Tea Party. It's in response to the Boston Tea Party. So here's the 4 things that happened. They closed the port of Boston. Financial consequences. If Boston can't do trade, Boston can't thrive. The British closed the port of Boston. They continued to reduce colonial self-government, having started with the withdrawal of Salutary Neglect, but this is just one more level where they're going to shut off local assemblies. This is a big one. This is going to affect people you love. Those accused of crimes have to be tried back in England. No longer were there local courts to try smugglers or other petty criminals. If you're accused of a crime, you got on a ship, you waved goodbye, went across the ocean, and realistically, by the time the court process was over, maybe you're unjustly found guilty in the first place, you're probably never going to see your family again. Just the accusation. You're accused of smuggling, you got to go to England for trial. That's a big one. That's like actually affecting families and their ability to be with each other. And then reenacted the quartering of troops. It went away for a while with the expiration of Taungen, but now quartering troops is back. So these are 4 punishments for Bostonians in response to the Boston Tea Party. So you can have your party, but you're going to have to deal with it afterwards as well. These actions and these consequences made Massachusetts kind of like a martyr to the rest of the colonies. Oh man, that revolutionary spirit in Massachusetts, in Boston, I wish we could all be like that. Or it became an inspiration. Let's be like Boston. Let's be like those Bostonians, because they're leading the fight for a revolution right now. So that's why Massachusetts and Boston will always be like the center, the heart of that revolutionary movement. Sparked a new resistance throughout the colonies. Pretty much like I said. Yellow words are probably what's on your notes. I think I went through and highlighted everything yellow. All right, 2 more nuggets here, and then I'm going to send you to your gallery walk. So the result of all this now, the Colonials are deciding to do something, and we call our first ever Continental Congress, the first gathering of an organized Congress of all the colonies. We've written letters. We've traded newspapers. This is the first time that we're going to meet in a government fashion together to talk about what to do next. So the royal governor had dissolved the Virginia Assembly. That fits in line with all that dissolution, all the dissolving of representative assemblies. So representatives met privately, issued a call to meet as a Continental Congress, and they did so in September of 1774. Against the law. Got to note that. It is against the law for them to gather in this fashion, but they're going to do it anyway. What do they talk about at the First Continental Congress? Representatives from all the colonies except for Georgia. A little bit of Georgia history. Georgia said, we're not going because we get a lot of protection from the British on the Indian frontier. So we don't want to tick them off and lose that protection. So Georgia goes to the second, but not the first. I'll just leave that there. They convene in Philadelphia. This is Pennsylvania. This makes Philadelphia now a hot seat for the revolutionary spirit as well. They make 4 major decisions. I'll go through them just briefly. 1, they reject a plan for a colonial unity. We're not getting back together. Okay, we are never, ever, ever getting back together. They're not going to get back together. We are not going to unite again under British authority. So in a way, that's a big step towards war. They endorse the statement of grievances reflecting a unity amongst themselves, right? They say that endorse the statement of grievances reflecting the conflicts among the delegates. Sorry, say it like this. They are not all on the same page just yet. You believe, Massachusetts thinks this, while the Carolinas think that. This is something we need to work on. So they acknowledge that they're not perfectly on the same page. That's that statement of grievances. Number 3 is they make resolutions recommending that, this is the big one, get ready for war. Hey, colonies, you probably need to get ready for war. The fact that we're meeting, the fact that we're breaking the law to meet, the fact that there's 12 out of 13 colonies here, we probably need to get ready for war. So each state should prepare to do that. And finally, they agreed to a no trade agreement with British. No imports, no exports, no consuming of British goods. We are done with them economically, and this amounts to an economic war. They have not. There's been no shots fired. And I know Boston Massacre was a bit of a shooting match, but there's been no formal shots fired yet. But this is going to amount to an economic war. This slide shows all 4 of them on the same screen. I'm going to go past it. This amounts to an economic war. There are 4 decisions. Basically put a freeze on trade and related to finances. This amounts to an economic war. We've walked through, I've said this several times, we're walking towards 1776. We've walked through about 14 years of trying to not go to war. This is the last ditch effort. This is our last chance to not shoot at each other. Maybe this will work, maybe it won't. The stage then is set for war. So, lengthier lecture, and I went really fast because I wanted to get to our backside activity here. So I'm going to explain that to you super briefly. There are 28 blanks here. I'm asking for you to answer 20 of them. When we step outside, I'll point out kind of the starting point. When I say starting point, it is in chronological order. However, you do not necessarily have to walk through it chronologically. I just want you to understand there is a starting point chronologically, and as you guys spread out, I don't want more than 2 per station. There's 11 stations, you can manage that. You're going to read the article that's there, read the writing that's there, see the questions. Some of these blanks have 2 questions, some of them have, I think, as much as 5, right? 2 to 5 questions per blank, or per category. You're going to answer 20 out of the 28. So that gives you some choice. You can skip a station, you can skip a particular question that stumps you, whatever. Give you some choice there. You probably won't get through this in the next 23 minutes. I'll post it to Google Classroom, and it'll be for you to read and finish over the weekend. But I want you to take some quiet time to be a reader. I've done all my talking. This is your chance to read something. Now, you may read a sentence that's like, I'm not sure Mr. Swanson said that. Yeah, there's some additional information out there. It's fine. You'll read it in context. I think you'll understand it. If you have questions along the way, you already. So take a clipboard, no more than 2 per paper, 2 per station, and just enjoy some quiet time. Ready to go.